That was my living room right after a pipe burst on my second floor. It flooded this entire room, causing me to have to tear everything out. While having that happen was pretty overwhelming, it wasn't all bad, because it gave me the chance to build a new, more updated fireplace. So in this video, I'm going to show you all the steps it took to take this from a hole in the wall to the fireplace you see behind me. And it might be easier than you think. The first thing I want to do is give a small overview of how the fireplace is actually constructed so that I can reference it as I'm going through the video. It's basically built in 3 sections, which is going to be the base, which makes up the hearth and what the fireplace actually sits on, the middle section where the fireplace slides into, and then the top section, which has to be built separate because it's recessed and it's set in a little bit so that the mantle can actually wrap around the entire thing. So as long as you know that it's built in 3 sections, this video is going to make a little bit more sense as we go. Step number 1 was to build the base of the fireplace. This was going to act as the foundation to the entire build, so I wanted it to be really solid. For this, I chose to use 2x12 construction grade lumber. It's probably a little bit overkill, but this was the simplest way to build the base, and it gave me the right height for my hearth. Using my miter saw, I cut everything down to their final size in the garage, and then I'll take everything inside and assemble it in the living room. Now that I have everything cut to size, I get everything into the living room, and now I can begin assembly. I start assembly by marking out on the 2x12s that are going to make up the front and the back. I mark where the joists are going to land. I don't know if these are called joists in this situation, but I'm kind of building this as if you would build a floor. And something I like to do as often as possible when it comes to assembly is pre-start all my screws. This just helps assembly go a little bit quicker, and it's much easier to start a screw when the board is flat on the ground versus when it's standing on its edge. And now I'm ready to assemble the base, and this is pretty straightforward. You just line up the front and back boards and then put all those joists in between and drive in all those screws that I just pre-started. And here you can see how pre-starting those screws makes it a lot faster and a lot simpler when doing assembly. And in no time at all, the base to my fireplace is complete. So at this point you might be thinking, alright, well let's build the next piece of this, but first I have to take care of this hole in the wall. And the backstory to this is there used to be a fireplace that was actually sunk into the wall that was flush with the wall. And my wife and I didn't love that look, and that's why we decided to build something that extended out into the room and that became more of a feature to the room. So before I could move on to the next section of the fireplace, I had to close off this wall first, and I just did that with a couple 2x4s. And I will be insulating this later in the video, but first I have to extend this gas line to get it on the other side of the fireplace. Like I said earlier, there was already a fireplace here, so I do have a gas line that's already run, but I do need to extend it because the new fireplace that I got, the inlet for the gas is actually on the other side. And full disclosure, I am not a plumber, I don't work with gas lines professionally, but I do feel comfortable taking on this smaller job, but if you do not, please hire a professional. Anytime I work with any sort of gas lines, I like to use a combination of Teflon tape and pipe dope together. This probably is a little bit overkill, but when it comes to something like a gas line, overkill is totally fine with me. So like I said a minute ago, my goal here is to just get the gas line to the other side of the fireplace. And this will make a little bit more sense in a second here, but I really just need to swing it over and then have it exit the wall on this side, which is going to come through the base of the fireplace and up into that second section. I promise it'll make more sense in a minute. And here I'm just adding a block to support the pipe. So now that I had the gas line exiting the wall, I could then slide the base back, and I'm going to need to drill a hole so that the gas line can come through the base. So here I just trace it out and then take a bit that's slightly bigger than the pipe and drill my hole. And once I have this hole drilled, I can then slide the base into place, but before that I want to make sure that this wall is well insulated. That brick doesn't provide much of an insulation factor, and the old fireplace actually used to freeze on the front of it in the winter. So now you can see how that gas line now exits the wall and goes into the base of the fireplace. And you'll see in a minute how we're going to finish that off. But before finishing off the gas line, I want to make sure that this base is perfectly level. You want to definitely spend your time to get this as level as possible, because once it's in place and you build everything on top of it, you're not going to be able to move it. So a few shims later, this thing is perfectly level. And then I go ahead and secure the base to the wall using some 2.5-inch screws, making sure that I hit a stud in the wall. And now that the base is leveled and secured to the wall, I can come back and finish off this gas line. And all I'm doing here is adding a 90-degree elbow and then I think a 10-inch riser or nipple that will extend up out of the base of the fireplace. And for now, I'm going to add a cap to the end of it until I'm ready to hook up the fireplace. And if you feel like a gas line is something you want to take on yourself, this is how I test to make sure that things aren't leaking. This is just a spray bottle with some soap and water in it, and you want to spray all the joints that you make, and if you see any type of bubbling, that just shows that there is some sort of leak in the seal. And I was fortunate to have no bubbles, which means no gas leaks, so we're good to go. And the last thing to finish off this gas line is to put some of this epoxy putty, which is basically like silly putty, around where that pipe is exiting, just to stabilize it, make sure that it's not going to move or bend over time. Probably not totally necessary in this case, but it also seals that hole and makes sure that if any bugs get back into that chimney, they're not going to come into my house. To finish off the base to this fireplace, I'm going to be putting a piece of plywood on the top, which will act as the surface for the hearth material, and everything else will be built on top of this. Once I get the piece cut to size using the table saw and my track saw, I can then take it inside, and I need to create a hole for that gas line to come through. And this is simple. I just line it up with the base and then use a square to draw a straight line back and then measure how far off the wall the pipe is. I then drill the hole where it needs to be and then slide the plywood over the pipe. And at this point, the base is 100% done and I'm ready to start building the next section. So I head back out to the garage and cut up all the pieces for the middle section. For this, I'm just going to use 2x4s and basically frame it out like you would do a wall. This middle section consists of a front wall and 2 small side walls. Here you're seeing me build the front wall first, and this may be different for everybody because there's going to have to be a custom opening based on the size of your fireplace. So make sure to reference the instruction manual that comes with your fireplace. You want to make sure you stick to their specifications on how big the opening should be and other things like how far away it should be from a mantle or even the back wall. So here I'm just finishing up that front wall, and you can see the opening for the fireplace there. I used 2x6s for the header and 2x4s everywhere else. I then did a quick check to see if it was square, which to be honest, it wasn't perfectly square, which will come back to bite me a little bit in a second here, but I was able to work with it. So like I said a minute ago, this second section, or the middle section, is going to consist of basically 3 parts, which is the front wall and then 2 little side walls, which I'm building here. And these are really simple. They're just a couple 2x4s, a little box that will make up this sidewall. So once all my walls were built for this middle section, the first thing I did was draw 2 level lines going straight up from the base of the fireplace. This is going to give me a reference line for my 2 little walls to then screw in to the base and the wall. At this point, I'm not fully securing these side walls. I'm getting them level and kind of held in place, but I want to be able to move them around when I put that front wall on so I can get everything into alignment. So after the front walls are set, I can then bring in the front wall and start to get everything put into place. So this is where I ran into a little bit of trouble with that front wall being out of square, but it wasn't a big deal. I just had to take the header off above the fireplace so that I could flex it back into square and get it to align with those side walls. But it all worked out fine in the end, and now the middle section is framed. And just like the base, I'm going to be putting a piece of plywood on the top of this middle section. But in order to do that, it needs to have support against the back wall. So I'm using this 2x6 as kind of a reference across the top, and then I'm going to put that 2x4 up to the bottom of it so that it's in perfect alignment with those 2 smaller side walls. And here I'm just finding the stud locations. I marked it on that 2x6, and then I'm going to transfer it to this 2x4 so that I can pre-start those screws, just making it a little bit easier when installing. And now that I have that back support installed, I can go back out to the garage and cut the piece to fit the top of this middle section. And this actually worked out great because this is the cutoff piece from that decking I did on the base, and it was just enough for the piece for the top of this middle section. So at this point you're probably thinking, cool, he's only got one more section to go and this fireplace is complete. And that is true, but I chose to run electrical up into this upper section so that I could power my TV that's eventually going to be mounted up here. And it's cool, if you don't plan on doing anything like this and don't care about this part, you can skip to the next chapter where I build the upper portion of this fireplace. But for anyone else who is interested, I'm removing the drywall here because I know there's an electrical line that runs just above the middle section right here. And I know this because it runs to the old switch that used to power the blower for the fireplace. So here I'm just pulling it back so that I can run it into the upper section of this fireplace. So like I said, I can have power for my TV. And if you're uncomfortable with this type of electrical work, don't be afraid to call in a professional. So once I had that wire exposed, I could move on to building the upper section of the fireplace. This entire upper section will be made from 2x4s that I went ahead and pre-cut out in the garage. And at this point, the two project managers wanted to see how things were going, and one of them likes to keep a really close eye on me. But I did manage to get all of my stud locations marked out, even with these two breathing down my neck. And just like the two previous sections, all I had to do was lay everything out and screw it together. This upper section was built almost exactly the same way that that middle section was. It has one small wall on each side and then a front wall. All I had to do was screw all the pieces together and then screw them into the ceiling and then down into that middle section, and everything was secure. And with this final screw, the entire fireplace is now completely framed out. With the construction of the fireplace complete, I now needed to finish up the electrical. And at the very minimum, I needed at least one outlet to plug the fireplace into. But like I said earlier, I chose to also put an outlet up above for the TV. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on this as I am not a licensed electrician, but I will show you at least what I did. And with the electrical complete, it's now time to put in the fireplace. This is a natural gas fireplace, and I chose this one because it is one, ventless, so I don't have to run any vents outside of my house, and two, the size was perfect, especially the depth. I didn't want this thing to be too deep, forcing it to stick out too far into the room. And what you see me doing here is just adding some supports for the fireplace to sit on. And now it's time for what we have all probably been waiting for, and that's getting the fireplace installed. And this part is probably the easiest part of the entire build. It really just slides right into its hole. And like I expected, it was a perfect fit. Off camera, I completed the install by hooking up the gas line and plugging it in, and now we're ready to go. And this fireplace is a little unique as it comes with a surround that goes around the entire fireplace. So the last thing to do is to slide that into place, and we were done. Shortly after I finished the fireplace, I had some guys come in and drywall the ceiling of this room and the top section of the fireplace. After everything was done being drywalled, I also decided that I wanted to run a cable and an Ethernet line up to the back of the TV as well. To do this, all I had to do was run some lines up from my basement. I just drilled a hole straight down through the base and then also up into the top section, and then ran the cables up to the same electrical box that I'm putting the outlet in. Before the drywall got installed, I removed the single gang electrical box that I had previously installed and decided that I would just use an old work box to bring everything in after the drywall. These old work boxes are great, I love using them. You just cut the hole to size, put it in the hole, and then it has these screws with tabs that as you tighten them, it basically clamps it to the drywall. And then once that's done, it's just as simple as wiring up an outlet, connecting the cable and Ethernet lines, and it's done. Now when it comes to finishing the bottom section of this fireplace, you could really do anything, but we're choosing to go with a cultured stone. I'm not going to install the cultured stone in this video, it'll be in a later video, so make sure you're subscribed for that. But for this video, I'm at least going to install the hardy backer or backer board that the stone will stick to. And the process for installing this hardy board is really easy. all you have to do is have a scoring knife. They make these special for this type of material. It just has a carbide tip on it, which you just score it a few times with a straight edge, and then you can take it to the edge of a table and it'll break right on that line. So I just followed this process and cut out all of the pieces that I needed until I had enough to cover the entire fireplace. And here you can see how I cut out all of my pieces to cover the entire fireplace. The goal is to have as few seams or gaps as possible. And once I had all the pieces staged where I wanted them, I could then go ahead and start installing them with these special screws that are made just for this material. And as I put in these final screws and finish this build, I just want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something. I hope this gives you the confidence to take on a project like this on your own. And if you want to see me build a mantle for this, make sure you're subscribed. That'll be coming up really soon. But until next time, I'm Jordan. This is Everyday Builds. See ya.